In this video, we are going to be talking Tradescantia, also known as spiderwort, wandering dude, turtle vine. There's lots of different varieties of this plant. We'll be covering Tradescantia CARE, how to get your Tradescantia looking beautiful and wonderful, why this plant tends to get long and straggly, a little bit leggy, how to prevent that, how to fix that, and of course, talking about how to propagate this plant. It is one of the easiest plants to propagate, how to get tons of this plant for absolutely free. This is my Tradescantia Zebrina. It's a very common houseplant, very popular, very easy to care for. This is my office plant, and it is doing the thing that a lot of Tradescantias do. It's getting kind of long, a little straggly, looking a little bare. It's not the lovely bushy houseplant that you usually see in plant shops or nurseries. So together we are going to repot this while I tell you about their care. I'll also tell you why these plants do have a tendency to start looking kind of bad. There's so many different varieties of these. These are also known as a turtle vine. This is a Zebrina. This is a very beautiful Tradescantia Nanouk. This one is called a Purple Heart. They are native to the Americas, from Canada all the way down to South America. That would also explain how they have kind of varied care. So unlike a lot of houseplants that come from more jungle regions, these actually do well in a variety of different climates depending on the variety. Some varieties like the Nanouk are a cultivar. They are not found in the wild, but they have been cultivated for their color and their variegation. I find the most common one you find is the Tradescantia Zebrina. Where I live in California, you see these either as hanging houseplants, and you also see them in landscaping. Sometimes people use them as ground cover plants, and that is also going to give you a clue as to why they don't always look so good when left in a hanging pot. But one thing about these plants is they are one of the easiest plants to propagate. So of all my collection of Tradescantias, I have not purchased a single one. I got every single one of these plants for free from a little tiny clipping. Their strands do break really easily, so it's very easy to find little clippings of these on the ground, in shops. My Purple Hearts came from, my mom had these in her yard. She was clipping them back and putting them in the compost, and I grabbed a few. I believe my little tiny turtle vine came from little broken pieces that I found on the shelves of Target. And my Zebrina came from, I'm pretty sure, Home Depot. Interestingly enough, cutting these is what will help make them look really, really good. When you cut the branches of any Tradescantia, another branch will come out. And then that cutting that you have taken, you just simply place it either in soil or in water, and they root so quickly. It is one of the fastest propagating plants I have ever come across, which also means it is one of my favorite plants in my collection. Not to mention the leaves are beautiful. There's this sort of natural variegation. The Zebrina, also known as a zebra plant, understandably, with its little stripes. The Nanouk has these really beautiful purple variegations. You can find varieties that are really fuzzy and soft. There's tons of them. I even have a lot of these that are just growing around my yard. I don't think they were planted there. They just sort of grow up like weeds. They're actually a little bit annoying sometimes, so I pull them out like weeds. As far as placement of these plants, they do like bright indirect light. If you are planting them outside, they are not frost resistant. You will want to have them in a frost-free zone. At least these more houseplant varieties, they will do just great growing outside, but they're more shady plants. They will get sunburned in hot, direct sunlight, but when I say bright indirect light, that means they do want some light. So that means light that's either, if you have them indoors, have them near a window, maybe not a hot direct window. They do really well with grow lights. If you want to maintain the more vibrant purpley colors that they come in, you will want to give them a little bit more light. When they have less light, they do tend to get really leggy. and they do go a little bit more green. Here in California, purple hearts are used a lot in landscaping because they are actually pretty drought tolerant, even though some of them, like the Zebrina, are more like tropical plants. So they do require some regular watering. This turtle vine gets really sad when the soil dries out. So you do want to put them in a soil that does maintain moisture, but you also want to have it well draining. They don't want to like sit in water. If you are looking for ways to find this plant for free, I have a tendency when you are plant shopping, if you're in the areas where they have a lot of hanging plants, keep a lookout up above. When you see a Tradescantia hanging, look in the shelves right below it. This plant often drops branches. Like I said, it's just part of this plant's propagation process. Even the saddest, smallest broken pieces that you find can be stuck in water and they will begin to root. And compared to a lot of plants, the rooting process of these plants is very, very quick. I tend to prefer using the water propagation method, especially if it's a piece that's a little bit wilted and looking like it needs to take in a little bit of water. It'll put the moisture back in those leaves. It'll give a little bit of energy to put some new roots out. Now with all water propagations, I always say make sure that your piece is calloused over. So that means if you find a piece or if you cut a piece, give it a day or two to let the end dry out a little bit before you place it in water, and that will help prevent any root rot that could occur in water propagations. Back to my sad office plant, and hopefully to answer any questions about why your Tradescantia is not looking as happy as it should. The reality of these plants, they're often sold and planted as hanging plants, as vining plants, but these are actually ground cover plants, which is also why it's so easily propagated. If you take a look at these stems, they have these little tiny nodules where more roots will come out because this plant wants to vine along the ground and find new places to plant itself down. So it's very common for when the leaves get older, for the old vines to lose their leaves, and that usually is the crown of your hanging plant. And that's just pretty normal for plants to lose their top leaves like that, but it's so easy to get it back looking its best. So in that sense, it is a plant that does require a little bit of maintenance. Now, the last time I repotted this, it was probably a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. And now it's just time, once again, to get it looking its very best. Because when you look down here, these leaves are happy, healthy, and these are just older. So what I'm gonna do is, I feel like this plant has also outgrown this pot because a shallower, wider mouth pot will help it put more roots in the ground and grow little small pieces to come out. So that is what we are going to do. Okay, so the time has come to repot. This is what you want with a Zebrina, nice stripes. These do sit in my office under a grow light. The light situation isn't too bad, but this is the kind of look you want. Nice stripage, green and white, and then on the back, a lovely purple color. So these are just sitting in this nursery pot, and I'm sure that these are not root bound, but it's more that they're getting kind of straggly. Some of the pieces are sort of falling out. But as mentioned, I think a wider brimmed pot will do this plant a world of good. So let's just get started with this. So to begin with, I'm just going to remove it from this pot. And this has seen better days. And okay, like I could just repot this as it is, but what I do want to do is trim it up in addition to the repot, because I don't like these little straggly bits. But what's cool, you can actually see now that I've taken that out of the pot, how this plant has branched out. So here is one piece. I'll just move this out of the way to demonstrate. This is one piece that started out here, and it branched into these 3 branches. So I'm just gonna chop it up. So the beauty of this is every place that I make a little chop, it will branch out some new branches. So I don't want to lose all of the plant. So the places where there are leaves, I'm gonna cut these like that. I could cut these into a ton of little tiny plants and it would do just great. But I do want to keep some fullness, so we will keep these longer branches. And then this, because this is not very pretty, I'm going to cut this into a couple of pieces. And I'm just making sure that we keep some of these nodes. You can actually see where the little roots will come out. Here's another piece where, I don't know if you can see this, it has branched off. So you can imagine if this is laying on the ground, how that becomes a bigger plant. Now the question is, do I keep this as one piece? You know what, I'm gonna try that. So I have my long pieces. Here's another one that I'm just gonna keep this as it is. And then I have these little stragglers. Interesting to me to see how these plants naturally propagate themselves. So I may have mentioned when you're propagating plants, there's different kinds of plants. Some plants, like a succulent, only needs a leaf. Other plants, like these Tradescantia, they require a node. And the node is the little stripes where the roots and the leaves come out of. So here's a perfect example on this one. You can actually see a leaf comes out, and then right below it, that's where roots come out. So, and look at that, that's already looking for a root. So if I'm gonna repot this, I'm going to bury it all the way up to here. That'll give lots of contact between the soil and the root and give it a lot of places to bring in that nutrition and moisture from the soil. And I should mention how hardy these plants are. I actually just dropped this and stood on it. Apologies, little plant. I'm going to cut it into a couple different pieces. And now I'm going to find a wider pot to put all these back into. And look at this. There's almost no, they have very little roots. And that's again why they're happier to grow along the ground, because they don't get those real long, deep roots. They have real shallow roots. So you want to give them as much contact and as much node contact as you can. And look, these are not plants that become root bound. That soil is almost devoid of any roots. There's a few, but not a lot. So let's get a nice wide brim pot so that we can use to replant these. So this seems like the perfect pot to use because it's shallow. As we saw, they don't need to go deep, but it's much wider brimmed. And I can lay a lot of these cut pieces onto the side and they'll grow, and also add my longer pieces. Now the soil that I'm going to be using, it's hard to tell because I've already opened it. It's EB Stone Organics, Edna's Best potting soil. So this is an organic potting soil. It is, according to them, good for indoor and outdoor. It's got a lot of nutrients built in there, and being a potting soil, it's going to hold a little bit more moisture. As you can see, there's a lot of organic material. This is a little bit different than, say, a cactus and succulent mix, which is a lot more gritty. It's really wet now because we had some rain and this has been sitting outside, but a much more sandy mix compared to a much more organic material mix. So here is my organic potting soil straight out of the bag. I'm also going to add some perlite. This is perlite. It's actually puffed volcanic rock. It looks like styrofoam. It is not. And this is really good for just adding a little bit more drainage ability. It kind of is really good for aeration because not only it can soak in water and retain water, but it also can whisk water away from roots, keeping roots healthy and not soggy. So with almost all plants, whether they're tropical plants or desert plants, they don't usually like sitting in really soggy soil. They want to have air to their roots as well. Not air pockets, but aeration. So you want a soil for this kind of plant, you want a soil that's going to retain some water, but not be overly saturated. Because that is how plants get root rot. You always hear about people saying they have a black thumb, and I just think it's because they're overwatering their plants and keeping them in really soggy conditions. So this is a really nice fluffy mix. I'm going to add a little more perlite down here. Is there a perfect mix ratio? To be honest, I just eyeball it. And you'll notice I'm filling that almost all the way to the top, because even though this is a repot, we have kept almost no roots. So I'm just very simply starting with these, and you'll notice I didn't pack it in too much. It's pretty fluffy. I might need to add more. I'm gonna lie these just right back down, and I'm making sure that a lot of the nodes are coming into contact with the soil. One tool that's really nice to have when you do these repottings, these are just like little succulent tools. You can get them for very inexpensive prices on places like Amazon, and they're just kind of handy for moving the soil around like that. So I'm going to end up probably with 2 pots, because I still have a lot more here that I'm going to just leave for now, and all these sticks and all of these branches that I want to get back in this pot. So normally I would recommend, if you have just cut your branch, and again, this is kind of a fresh cut, it's very moist. If I put that straight into the soil, it could start rotting. So I'm actually going to leave these and come back to this.
3 days later.
Okay, so it has now been not 1, but 3 days since I chopped all these pieces, and I really felt that it was important to callus off the ends before I propagated them. That means letting the ends dry, and that kind of helps it to prevent moisture getting inside the stem, preventing rot, because that is the danger when you propagate any plants, really, whether they be succulents or more traditional vining plants such as this. So here's where we left off. We had all of these stems, and this is the kind of thing I do as well, is I start to think about, oh, maybe I've left these in here, maybe they're a little too long, maybe I'm better off propagating these in water. I think I'm going to leave them for now, but a lot of them, we do just want to make sure that all of the nodes that are in here are in contact with the soil. And I'm also going to make sure that this soil stays moist. It's dry now to help put them in here, but then once we wrap up for today, I'm going to make sure it stays really nice and moist. And also, I don't want these to be too long, so it will start growing new little branches out of these ends. I'm going to cut that back because a branch will likely grow out of here and also here. I'm going to just cut them way down. This is kind of an odd one. This is a little too odd for me. I'm going to cut it here. So, I mean, that's perfectly normal to start potting up something and then go, you know, let's rethink this. Especially because we have a lot of these bigger branches to fit in here. So some of these might have to come out in order for them to fit, because I've packed them in pretty tight. And what I can do as well is I can actually plant these elsewhere. So this one's taken up a lot of space. I might just plant it elsewhere. You know, we might water propagate these. So here we go. This just goes to show you can change your mind. It's completely allowed. So some of these, if you remember, were already had roots. So I'm gonna make sure those roots are buried in the soil. And now I'm gonna start adding these longer branches. So it's pretty simple to see where the little roots will come out. I'm going to remove these bottom leaves and just pop these into the soil like so. And the more places that you can have nodes touching the soil, the better. I sometimes use little pieces of garden wire like this to help keep them in. So that's lifting kind of out of the soil. And if I use this wire to just hold it down, it's more likely to be successful at rooting itself. Here's an interesting piece. Hopefully this won't look too wacky when I plant it all up. I'm gonna stick that way deep in there. And then I'm gonna get another piece of wire to hold that down. It's pretty simple. I just have wire like this that I use in the garden. And I just cut a little piece like this, bend it, and that'll help keep that in contact with the soil. This is maybe a little too long. I'm gonna cut this one even shorter. And I'm gonna let that callus over. So the idea is that like it was looking long and straggly before, and this way it'll start to look more full, a little bit happier, and it should be able to do this pretty quickly without having to have a bad period of looking bad, you know, because I've kept these long branches. And it's pretty remarkable that these plants really can stay out of the soil for a few days without wilting, because they have so much moisture in their stems already. And I'm actually going to, now that I'm seeing this, I'm going to add more soil to the top as well, because it does sort of tend to condense down once you start fiddling with it. Now this is looking pretty full, but some of these branches are sticking up a little bit, so I'm going to add some more wire, and then I'm going to add a little bit more soil to the top. Sprinkle that on, and it's just kind of ensuring that all those little nodes are in contact with soil, which I will also now add water to. Okay, so far, this is what we're looking like, right? I mean, would I buy that in a plant store? No, but I know it is going to really start filling out. And it looks a little bit better. And it's gonna be much healthier going forward because it has a wider mouth of this pot. So I'm gonna put it in, I have this glass bowl. I love this bowl because it's great for catching soil. And when you water, especially something like this that you wanna give it a really good soak, I'm gonna water from above. I'm gonna let all that water drain through, because really all pots should have drainage. And that's why I like these nursery pots, because nursery pots have built-in drainage, and then you can usually fit them into a more decorative pot that doesn't have holes. And it's actually great because when you do water them, the decorative pot can hold onto the water like that, will allow the bottom watering. So I'm just gonna sit here, let this soak in, pull some of those leaves out that got buried. We don't really want our leaves to be buried. So I'm gonna leave those there and let everything soak in. And then if you look at my workstation here, I still have a ton of leftover branches here. There's some more here. There's this one as well. I probably will add this one to that tomorrow once I've allowed that new cut to callus over. But all of these can be propagated and will grow even more plants. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm just going to set up a water propagation because I feel like that's the easiest way to get these guys going. Okay, so I just have a regular old glass jar. I'm going to fill it with water and just start adding these branches. And one thing about propagation is you don't really want, if you do have leaves like these, and of course I just took the wrong ones off because this is the bottom. Oh well. If you do have leaves, you don't really want the leaves to be in contact with the water. And I'm cutting these shorter because I think I can make more plants out of them. The little branches will come out. Here's a good example. We're gonna put those there and not have the leaves in contact with the water. The leaves contacting the water does usually end up making the water get gross, the cutting get rotten. Let's see, that goes this way. You can tell which is the bottom and which is the top because if you see the node here, and then there's a little bit of leftover leaf, that's the top. Because if you see how the leaves come out, they come out that way. So when I don't have any leaves, like on this one, I know this side is the top because the leaf is going upwards. Hopefully that makes sense. And I don't want them to be completely submerged. One trick, if you don't want it to get completely submerged, you could use plastic wrap, wrap it over the top, and stick them out to help keep them upright in there. So here are my bits that need to be calloused over. Here are my propagations. Down there is my overall plant.
1 week later.
So it has been about a week since I repotted this. Obviously it doesn't look that different, but I do want to show you what has happened. If you notice, here is one of the branches. This actually came out 2 pieces. This one goes this way. And if I lift this up here, you can actually see how it is starting to just root itself into the soil in 1 week. That again is how quickly these things propagate themselves and why it makes them one of the easiest plants to propagate and grow and make it continually look good. So a week later, let's check in on our little stems that I put in the water for water propagation, see if they have rooted. I chose a bad jar as an example because it's hard to see through that. So there are indeed roots popping out of these plants. I don't know if you can see that. Tiny roots, but like I said, it's only been about a week since I put these in. So if you have a plant like Tradescantia, I mean, all of these little broken, busted stems that you could easily just throw away, but you could also get all new plants out of them. And that is it. I hope this video has been helpful to get your Tradescantia looking its very best. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below. I am also on Instagram and TikTok, and don't forget to subscribe.